Hello everyone! In patch Luna 3, Durin will be the one new 5-star character releasing to Genshin. He's looking to be a pretty strong and incredibly versatile support, working with a wide variety of teams and buffing a lot of units, including newer characters and especially the more older release characters. And he's only gotten better after the first couple weeks of his beta cycle, only getting overall beneficial changes. So let's take a quick look into his beta kit to see how strong Durin looks. But as always, remember that this is very early information before official release, so very subject to change. Durin is a 5-star pyro sword user who ascends with crit damage. While we are in the middle of the nod-krai patches, Durin is not a nod-krai character with moon sign. Instead, he is a new type of character being introduced called an Arcane character. The info calls them magic characters, but the actual name is not confirmed yet. After completing some sort of quest, certain characters can become an Arcane character. In Luna 3, the Arcane characters will be Durin, Venti, Klee, Albedo, Mona, Razor, Fischl, and Sucrose. When you have at least 2 Arcane characters on the team, the Arcane characters will gain specific buffs within their kit. It's basically a faction-specific resonance or buff. Durin himself will get slight increases to his buffing capabilities with 2 Arcane characters. To quickly go over what the older characters are looking to get, Venti is getting main DPS capabilities and can also buff another Animo main DPS. Klee's damage is increasing. Albedo is getting a damage buff and the ability to buff the team. Mona will be able to extend her Omen buff by on-fielding. Razor is becoming an actual competent Electro DPS, mainly in Shepherd's Overload. Fischl is getting buffing capabilities for her own damage and for the on-fielder. And finally, Sucrose is getting a very slight extra team buff. Most of these buffs to the older characters are quite significant, and Durin being an Arcane character can thus help enable the use of these character buffs in strong teams. Durin's kit is very simple in practice. His role is to buff and deal off-field pyro damage, and his abilities give him 2 different ways of doing this. Using his skill gives him access to 2 different forms, light or dark, by pressing skill again or normal attack. Along with an initial attack that generates 4 particles, entering either of these forms gives Durin 33 energy and allows him to use one of 2 different elemental bursts, which provides 2 kinds of off-field pyro application. Using skill burst gives the light mode, which deals AoE off-field pyro application every 1 second and applies pyro every other hit. With light mode, when the party triggers pyro related reactions, including applying pyro or dendro to a burning target, Durin will give 20% res shred for the corresponding elements involved with the reaction. Note that melt and vaporize are not listed, meaning that Durin cannot shred cryo or hydro res. With 2 Arcane characters on the team, this res shred increases to a total of 35%. Using skill normal attack burst gives the dark mode, which deals single target off-field pyro application every 1.25 seconds and applies pyro every other hit. It has slightly higher multipliers than light mode, and dark mode also increases Durin's own vaporize and melt damage by 40%. With 2 Arcane characters on the team, this bonus is increased to a total of 70%. Lastly, Durin's off-field pyro damage from his burst, whether light mode or dark mode, is increased based on his attack with his A4 passive, maxing the buff when Durin has 2500 attack. Next, to quickly go over Constellations, C1 gives Durin 20 quill buffs, which can either increase 20 instances of damage from the party with his light form, or 10 instances of his own damage with dark form. With C2, after Durin uses burst and the party triggers any pyro related reaction, including reapplying burning, the whole team gets 50% damage bonus to the corresponding elements involved in the reaction. C3 increases his burst town level by 3, C4 gives Durin 40% burst damage when he gets the C1 quill buffs after using his burst, and they have a 30% chance of not being consumed when buffing a damage instance. C5 increases his skill town level by 3, and C6 allows his burst to ignore a portion of the enemy's defense. With the dark form, the defense ignore is further increased, while with the light form, his off-field attacks will decrease the enemy defense to buff the team. Overall, they look like fine constellations for a support-oriented character. C1 looks slightly preferred over getting his signature, and C2 is another solid early constellation because of the large damage bonus buff for the team. In terms of potential builds, Durin's signature weapon will be his overall best weapon. Gives crit rate, crit damage, as well as an attack buff to the team, which gets larger if there are 2 Arcane characters on the team. A solid weapon for his personal damage with an additional team buff, which is good assuming the other characters of the team are attack scalers. Generic 5-star stat sticks will be fine to increase Durin's personal damage, such as Primordial Jade Cutter and Mist Splitter. For 4-star weapons, Wolfang looks to be his best option, especially with refinement, since it gives crit rate and elemental burst damage. Unfortunately, the crit rate from the special passive doesn't stack when Durin is off field, but the weapon is still fine nevertheless. Lion's Roar is also fine to use in teams like Overload to maximize the uptime of its special passive, and for a completely free to play weapon, you do get one copy of Moonweaver's Dawn from nod-krai Exploration. Durin's energy cost is 70, so you don't activate the extra effect, but you still get the base 20% elemental burst damage at R1. For artifacts, Durin doesn't have any specific synergistic set. The most general set is looking to be 4-piece emblem, as Durin's off-field damage comes from his burst, and you'll get extra ER to ensure you have it up. Other than that, you can use 4-piece noblesse for the extra attack buff if there isn't a better holder of it on the team. And if you don't need the noblesse buff or the extra ER on Durin with 4-piece emblem, you can use 2-piece Crimson Witch and 2-piece noblesse for more damage. For a main DPS Durin build, he can use 4-piece Marchese Hunter or 4-piece Crimson Witch depending on the team. His main stats is pretty standard for a regular pyro damage dealer: attack Hourglass, pyro damage Goblet, crit Circlet. Attack Goblet is also viable if it has good substats. For main DPS Durin in Vapor Melt teams, you can run an EM Hourglass. Finally, Durin's potential best teams. Durin can pretty much be used in any team that can take advantage of his off-field power application, fulfilling the role of a support Mavuika, and in some team comps, taking the spot of Bennett, trading his buffs for sub DPS. In addition, although Durin does gain buffs with 2 arcane characters, it isn't 100% necessary for him to achieve this, so he can stand as the sole arcane character in a team just fine. Though 2 arcane characters is incentivized to enable the arcane buffs for mainly the other characters. Durin can be played in a lot of teams, so I will briefly go over most of the main archetypes here. The trio of Durin, Fischl, and Chevers make an incredibly strong team core, especially since Durin enables Fischl to buff the team's attack with her arcane buff. Pretty much any Electro or Pyro main DPS can be slotted in, such as Clorand, Raiden, Arlecchino, Linny, and arcane buffed Klee. Arcane buffed Razor also applies, but will likely use Bennett over Fischl. And Veressa can also use Durin with Aeon Sun instead of Fischl, where Durin acts as a Mavuika side grade at minimum depending on your choice of Mavuika combo. Durin can be a sub DPS to Anemo carries like Wanderer Xiao and the newly arcane buffed Venti. Durin can even pair with Venti to be a duo support for another Anemo main DPS, with Venti acting like a Faruzan alternative. For Geo DPSs like Navia and Ito, Durin can pair with Albedo to activate his strong arcane buffs for an overall improved team in terms of damage. Durin can also be a decent melt support for Wriothesley using his light form, focusing on buffing Wriothesley's damage, or you can use his dark form and have Wriothesley drive Durin melts, focusing on Durin's damage instead. Nivulet can use Durin as just a generic sub DPS using his dark form for yet another usable character in his team, or Durin can use his light form alongside Llama for a Burgeon oriented team. Mualani is looking to get a nice buff with Durin, as even without Hydro Red Shred, Durin does damage, provides enough Pyro over Vapes, and enables Arcane buff Mona to better buff Mualani than compared to Mona without the Arcane buffs. Durin can also enable Arcane buffed Albedo, who can work very well with Mualani as well. Kanich can use Durin as a Mavuika replacement, and can enable Albedo and Fischl to be decent Emily alternatives. And with Durin's recent change with his Red Shred reapplying properly with Burning, the Emily version of the team is looking like a slight upgrade over Mavuika's. Chaska utilizes Durin well in an Overvape team with Fischl plus Mona, or using Aeon Sun instead of Mona for an Overload team. Flynn's with Anefa can utilize Durin with enough Hydro application in an Overvape team. He can even be used in Anefa-less comps by enabling Arcane buff Fischl to introduce both her new attack and EM buffs to Flynn's. Another Overvape team can be made using on-field Mona as a driver and Yehoda for off-field Hydro application. Lastly, Durin can be played on-field as a main DPS in a Vaporized team using Dark Mode with Bennett, using the Pyro infusion from Bennett's burst so that Durin can vape his normal attacks. That's everything on Durin as of now. Based on Durin's beta kit, he's looking like a pretty strong character that has only gotten better as his beta progressed. As a general off-field pyro support that does solid damage and can provide team buffs, he works well with so many different characters and team archetypes, especially those that take advantage of pyro related reactions. The current best off-field pyro support for most characters is support Mavuika. Now how good Durin is compared to Mavuika as an off-fielder depends on the team and whether you can do the new optimized Mavuika combos. If you can do the optimized Mavuika combos, then currently Durin looks to be a Mavuika side grade. And if you don't use the optimized Mavuika combo, which is probably the case for most players, then in general Durin is an upgrade over Mavuika as an off-fielder. Considering Mavuika is a really strong character, Durin matching or surpassing her as an off-field pyro option in many teams speaks to his strength and potential meta relevance. Even if you already have Mavuika, Durin being a competitive option as a support can allow you to use Mavuika for another team, which can be incredibly valuable. Durin not only buffs new newer DPSs like Malani and Kanich, but he also buffs a large part of the older roster of characters. Since Durin is an Arcane character, he helps enable the significant character buffs of the select older mondstadt characters who will also be Arcane characters. And on top of that, Durin can synergize with these Arcane characters to buff many older DPSs who may not be considered as meta, which can be considered just as valuable as raising the damage ceiling with newer characters. But of course, this is just Durin's beta kit, so anything could change in the upcoming weeks. I hope this quick overview and analysis on Durin's beta kit was helpful to y'all. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, like the video, or sub to the channel if you enjoyed, and with that, I hope you all have a wonderful day.